What was your first crypto gig, job, whatever you did?
The first crypto gig job is actually Super Team Earn.
And also, why does a customer want to access it via a bank, Jupiter Mobile, or even a centralized exchange is directly available to them, right?
I need USDC in the first place. Versus in a bank, if I want to buy, let's say Solana, bank will transfer AED and allow you to buy with AED in your bank account.
For example, in a centralized exchange, it's very common to have like an omnibus wallet where you have one wallet which manages all of your treasury, right? And also especially important if you're using cold wallets. Otherwise, you'll end up with many wallets to manage.
If a bank is doing this, they need to have a custody license. But getting a custody license is very simple for a bank. It's not a factor of what the bank wants, it's more about the insurance.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the OnlyDevs Podcast. Today we have Srijan, the CTO of Fuse, and also one of my very good friends and also one of the early members of Super Team. Welcome to the podcast, Srijan.
Thanks a lot, Sheikh.
Awesome. Srijan, so one of the questions that we typically start with is like, you have a very strong tech background, right? Like IIT Kanpur and then Microsoft Research, then Goldman, and then you had a startup of your own. So like, when was the switch? Like, why did you decide to, what pulled you into crypto?
So I think I can take two answers. One is Super Team. But I got into love with crypto a little before Super Team and Solana. This is when I was working at Goldman. We were building liquidity provisioning algorithms. The idea was to do liquidity provisioning in 10 nanoseconds. Then Ethereum came by. And then you see Ethereum wherein you don't require sophisticated people to do liquidity provisioning. You have an AMM. It is automatically rebalancing. The fact that there's a world computer wherein automatically you can go and trade, which will run independent of thousands of devs running it, completely blew my mind. We were spending a lot of time doing algorithms in private silos, but then you could just do it on chain. That was when the love came in. That is when I read about the Uniswap formula. That is when I realized that you can deploy these programs. You don't need AWS. It'll just run out of the box. That's how I got interested in crypto. After that, it became a problem of distributed systems. How do you do consensus? Byzantine fault tolerance. Like at the core, crypto and blockchain is distributed systems. It's trying to solve a problem which was never solved before Bitcoin. And the cool concepts that Satoshi introduced to solve the BFT problem.
Very interesting. What was your first crypto gig, job, whatever you did?
The first crypto gig job is actually Super Team Earn. Before that, I was working on my own startup, which was an edtech startup called Allround. And I had heard of Super Team. I had seen the podcast. I think it was called Super Pumped back then it became Super Team. The first gig was actually building out the front end for Super Team Earn. We were racing for, I think, the Mumbai Hacker House. And it was Cash, me, Yash, Pratik Dolani, and we were building this cool platform wherein people could come and do gigs themselves. Uh, it's a fun, interesting thing that, okay, we are building something for gigs. Before that, technically, I did a small thing for Neil wherein we were doing the Instagrams online. It was not crypto per se, but that was my proof of work, wherein I helped him build the bot, which would automatically give Instagrams. But building out Super Team on the first layer of it, how we had attestations, how people could commit, all of that was the first crypto gig that I did.
Very interesting. I remember when we met in Delhi, I think you were wrapping up your old startup and still figuring things out. I'd love to know what made you transition to Fuse Finance. It also seems like a contrarian bet. You didn't start up in India, you started up in Dubai. Well, I guess it's not very contrarian in crypto.
Yeah.
But it's a big challenge, I guess. Maybe not again in crypto. But we'd love to know the initiation story of Fuse Finance.
So I think Fuse Finance comes from the fact that 2022 was probably the worst year in crypto for most of us, right? First, you get hit by Luna and Three Arrows Capital. Then, when you're recovering from Luna and Three Arrows Capital, FTX pulls off something that completely shocked the crypto world, right? I still remember that. By the way, Fuse started 1 week before FTX happened, and that entire week I was in shock. Like, this was the first time I believed that someone is good and they were not. So SBF completely blew my mind. So the bet for Fuse Finance comes mostly from in 2022, we realized that DeFi is great, but it's never going to become mainstream. Like the number of DeFi users will always be these frontier people who want to play around with money. But if you really want crypto and the power that it had to be used by everyone in the world, you need to do something with regulated financial institutions. So in that sense, UAE was a way ahead because they had regulatory regimes over there. They had VARA, they had different organizations which are coming up with guardrails so that you can actually form a regulated entity and then service banks. Uh, the GTM was also simple. If you service banks and if you service these fintechs directly, they will be able to offer these to their consumers, maybe in a way wherein the consumers don't know they're using crypto. And today that is happening with like stablecoins all across the world. So that was the core bet that we get a regulatory license, which will allow us to service a bigger base. And once that bigger base comes into crypto, they could possibly on-ramp themselves to DeFi. But we wanted the crypto rails to completely revolutionize banking. And I think in 2025, it has happened right now because stablecoin banking is a reality. Everyone is using stablecoins. That completely changes what fintech is. Earlier, fintech was a layer on top of like banking infrastructure. Now, fintech can be built on top of crypto, and banks can start using like the relationship between banks and fintechs is completely flipped now.
You mentioned GTM was getting a VARA license. How difficult is it, or I guess was it to get a VARA license back then? What does one need if they want to start a similar institution?
So number one, getting a regulatory license is a capital constraint problem, right? So one, you have to pay the supervision fees every year. You have to have like upfront capital that you need to give. You need to have like the right people in place, compliance, legal, operations, onboarding risk to actually get the license. So it's not a simple task. When we started in November of 2022. We did not have our license for at least 18 months. So we were building the entire stack. I think we got our license in 2023. Yeah, actually, it took us 1 year. We're still one of the faster companies that got our license. We never went operational before last year. So Jan 1st, 2024 is when we went operational. For the first 13, 14 months of our existence, we were building in silo, applying for the license. That requires us to fill in a lot of documentation. That is not something that I would ask a typical startup to do. It takes a lot of time. And Vara was also still new when we applied. Now Vara is an established institution, and there are hundreds of thousands of companies applying, including like the Bybits of the world, the Binance of the world. So it's become more difficult. So now there's a big queue for people to apply. So one, you need the capital. You need more than the technical know-how to get a licensing. You need the right kind of corporate structure, legal officers, compliance officers, and money to actually get it done. But once it's done, it allows you a fair bit of first mover advantage because no one else can service the same customers as you can.
The core bet was that, stable coins and crypto will pull banking into a newer dimension. So I'm curious to, hear from you how banks and older financial institutions actually received your ideas or received your offerings when you were to tell them, hey, this is like this new thing called stable coins. This was back in 2022 and 2023, right? Way before the Genius Act. So curious to hear about what was their reaction like and how did they
I think
engage
the
with
first
you?
few banks said that it's not going to happen, right? So it was not like everyone just opened the doors and like, oh, come on, let's do crypto. We had to do a lot of convincing for people to start accepting what we're doing, right? So it took us like the first bank went live last year in November. So it took us 2 years to convince one bank, and this is a digital only bank. VO is a bank which is live right now. They took the deep dive that, hey, we will enable crypto. And now we have many more banks. Rack Bank went live last month. They went live with Bitpanda. Um, Other banks, ENBD through its app Live has gone live. More banks are going to go live. We have 5 or 6 banks lined up. We're going to go live in the next 6 months. So now the tide has shifted and people have realized that crypto is something they should adopt. But this is more of buy, sell, hold crypto. We are still seeing adoption in the area of using stable coins for more products, like using stablecoin for payments, for which the licensing regime has now come in, using stablecoins for remittance, which I think a lot of fintechs are now doing in different corridors across the world, or just using stablecoins to top up balances. Right? That's a big use case right now. That happens with Grab in Singapore, wherein you can use stablecoins to top up balances. It's just a much better mechanism than Swift. And in terms of if you think about what it entails for consumers, a lot of consumers do not want to go through Swift. It takes 3 or 5 days. Sometimes it takes weeks. The money doesn't land. You have to follow up. There is no transparency. Like stablecoin transfer, any kind of crypto transfer is completely transparent. Like you know when it got transferred, who got it, when did they get it. You can actually do AML, KYC checks. So that fundamental shift has now happened. Banks are looking at different ways to do it. They are looking at tokenized deposit. They're looking at tokenized bonds. How do they drive efficiency using like the stable coins?
S- So when Vio or any of these banks offer crypto services, right, what exactly are they offering to their customers? And also, why does a customer want to access it via a bank? When something like Jupiter Mobile or even a centralized exchange is directly available to them, right? So I'm curious how this consideration set for a customer.
So I think the biggest problem is on-ramp, right? So if I have to buy anything on Jupiter Mobile, I need USDC in the first place. Versus in a bank, if I want to buy, let's say Solana, then I can immediately, the bank will transfer AED and allow you to buy with AED in your bank account. The off-ramping problem is a big problem in crypto, which completely gets solved with banks. So the flow is so smooth that I go on the app, I have, let's say, 10,000 dirhams. I want to buy Solana worth 100 dirhams, I can immediately buy it. There is no friction part. And that is true with centralized exchanges also. You need to get the USDC first, or you need to transfer through Swift. So you've gone back in circles. Like to actually get the money in, you need Swift again, which is a problem. Or you need ACH, or you need Fedwire. All of these are very slow mechanisms. So banks will, in the future, after the Genius Act, I think banks will just do one-click convert to the bank stablecoin. So what will happen is, let's say I have a Chase account. In Chase, I have USD. In one click, I'll get Chase USD. That can then be transferred to Jupiter, and then the flow is complete. But as of today, the flow is very broken. So you need a bank in between. I think banks become more powerful with stablecoins. They will have Chase USD, that'll go. You'll have to have some kind of clearing mechanism which converts all kinds of USDs into like one USDC or one USDT or whatever you want. But this mechanism then will solve the major problem with crypto as of today, which is on-ramp and off-ramp.
How does the bank look at it from a bank's perspective? Is this like a new product offering for them? Just like, how if you go to HDFC or ICICI, you get a demat account, or in the US you get a brokerage account. So are they looking at it as part of their entire wealth management portfolio? Is that where they are coming from?
So they have two different use cases of this, right? For the wealth management, they are more looking into Bitcoin, like offering these frontier assets which are not accessible to investors. So these are HNIs, people who are qualified investors. So they will sell them Solana, Bitcoin, ETH, whatever is there. On the other side is the normal banking, like the day-to-day banking. There you will have stable coins, which is for payment means, just for like medium of exchange. So there are two different segments, and different segments of the bank are looking at differently. People already, for example, a lot of crypto native folks have Solana. So banks want to offer loans against Solana. For them, they're looking at, hey, we get these on-chain assets and we want to underwrite loans. They're looking at other things like, can we have clearing houses on chain? Can we trade different kinds of assets on chain? Uh, can we take the deposits which are already there? For example, I might have some deposits on HDFC. Can I get it converted to tokenized deposits and use that for something else? Uh, so these are the use cases banks are interested in. All verticals are covered. It is insurance, so people want to insure your Bitcoin. It is investing. It is payments. It is insurance. So all different verticals are being done right now.
For example, if I deposit BTC or Solana
Yeah.
into a bank account, so do
Yeah.
I still have the custody of my assets, or I have given the custody to the bank? So how do they?
You've given the custody to the bank. So you give up self-custody over here for extra guarantees. That is like essentially that is the dilemma, right? So do you want to give up the custody of assets or not? I think in the future, banks will allow you to withdraw to your own custody. But a lot of the banks are now developing their own custody stack. It's just like custodying money, right? They've always been custodian of your assets. You give them cash and you get a digital representation. Now they're going to build their own custody stack wherein they will be custodying your Bitcoin, your Solana. Then they will also give you some staking rewards. So the good thing is banks are also looking into staking and they want to give the staking rewards back. They'll probably charge a small commission on top, but they're open to all of these mechanisms. They're also open to taking the USDC that you have, deploying it in DeFi, and giving you a cutback. So banks have like at least in the UAE, all banks have a head of digital assets, and they're very forward-thinking folks. They are looking at what all needs to be done with what all is evolving in the crypto space, what all features can we give, but also in a safe way. Because I think a lot of the retail customers, they want to be very careful before introducing anything to them, which might cause them losing the principal.
That is probably much more important, right? In the sense that the it's so, especially when you're dealing with newer protocols or just even custodying crypto in general, all you need is like one simple mistake. So
Yes.
the that shows up either as regulatory or compliance cost, or you solve it with technology, right? So I'm curious to hear more about how you actually think about this. Is custody part of your uh, product offering, or is it something that banks are taking on themselves?
So I think it's both. Banks are also taking out themselves. Uh, Mostly banks want to do custody themselves because that's their forte. They have teams which are taking care of cold custody. They employ qualified custodians. What banks end up doing over here is they will manage, like we'll probably have some hot custody, but at the end of the day, the cold custody will lie with the bank so that all the funds are stored with them. There are a lot of qualified custodians in the world which will give you insurance provided it's completely cold. Cold custody is an interesting topic because it's completely secured, no online activation. We use what we do in these particular cases is we run the RPC nodes and we get the balances by querying the blockchain addresses. So we don't need an API integration. That's an architectural decision that you take because once you have an API integration, that's another vector that you want to avoid in security. So different banks have their own different cold custody stack. We just tend to fetch the balances using the blockchain, and then we just report it onto the bank. Uh, Especially in a lot of locations, custody is becoming mandatory in the region that they are. Like we are talking to Turkish banks, they are hosting their own custody. UAE banks are now hosting their custody. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen with US as well. A lot of these custody providers, cold custodians, will be acquired with banks who will then become the primary custodians of crypto.
I actually would love to double click on their custody their accounting model, right? So, for example, in a centralized exchange, it's very common to have like an omnibus wallet where you have one wallet which manages all of your treasury, right? And also, especially important if you're using cold wallets. Otherwise, you'll end up with many wallets to manage. So, how does a bank typically does it? So, is it like an omnibus wallet? If it is an omnibus wallet, how are they thinking about things like proof, actually having the reserves? Because from a centralized exchange to bank, they operate in very different levels of regulations, right?
Yes. So again, if a bank is doing this, they need to have a custody license. But getting a custody license is very simple for a bank because they're already doing with fiat money. Now, usually it's not a factor of omnibus in terms of what the bank wants. It's more about the insurance, right? So you split up a wallet into multiple pieces because it's easier to insure individual cold wallet. Most of the insurance providers will not provide insurance more than 100 million. So the maximum asset you'll have is the quantum of insurance that you have. So they will insure multiple different wallets, each for like 50 million. So that is a strategy that you do only depending on the insurance. So it's not mandated by what I want. It's mandated by how much insurance coverage I'll get. It's a very different consideration for banks, right? So it's not a technical challenge. It's how do we make sure that accidentally if one of these wallets get hacked, we can still recover all of the funds.
Where does Fuse Finance come into the picture here? Like, what tech are you building? If you can dive a little deeper into this,
Yes.
for banks.
So what we've done is we built like an API stack which offers a lot of these features that banks would want, right? So let's say the use case of buying, selling old crypto. We embed directly into the banking app and you can buy or sell crypto using that. What our stack does is it exposes unified API. It has an account structure. Anyone can create an account, create a user. They have to give some KYC documents according to the regulation. And then once the account is ready, you can start trading for that account. We abstract all of the blockchain components. So we have an open loop, just like Privy does, wherein you can use Fuse Finance APIs to orchestrate your own wallets, and you can then buy crypto, sell crypto on ramp, off ramp, all automated fashion. So we have connectivity with different banking providers. So you can provision a bank account wherein you can transfer the funds. Once the funds are hit, you get a webhook. from the webhook, then you know that, okay, I have now 10,000 dirhams. You can start trading on it. Um, so in a nutshell, we provide this entire API stack, which looks like a simple Web2 API, REST API to manage all of your crypto. Uh, it the API is so simple that you can also trade fiat or you can trade stocks on it. It's in an exchange API, you usually have convert BTC to USDT. In our API, you'll have convert BTC to USD or BTC to AED. We've built it on AWS, so I think the engineering that went into this is very interesting. On We've abstracted out different components. We have one whole custody service which can connect to the multiple custodians that we have. We have to support multiple custodians because we have to support the bank custody providers also. So if a bank has a hot custody wallet, we need to abstract it out and integrate with our custody provider. We built a completely event-based mechanism. It's a pub sub mechanism that scales really well. That was also what we had at Goldman. So everything is an event. You have API servers distributed across multiple availability zones, so that if one of them goes down, you can always have another come up. BCP is a term which is very common with banking. So they need to make sure that you're always up. You need to have a 99.99% uptime. So we built it on multiple ACs. What ends up happening is API server is the front end. When it gets a request, converts it to an event message, publishes it to the event bus. Then the multiple consumers will consume the message and act on it. We have different consumers. We have for orders. We have different servers for payments. We have for notification, audit. So we built a big cluster of services, microservices, which are doing it. We've all done it on a mono repo though. So it's not like a true microservices. It's like a mono repo having a pub sub consumer architecture. I think that scales really well.
You're the ones who are providing the swaps to the bank. So where do you source liquidity from?
Once you get an API server message, it's an order request. It goes to a consumer, which is an order service. That has something we call the smart order router. That will go and get liquidity from multiple different venues. So we work with regulated liquidity providers, be it the FalconX, Wintermute, B2C2, all of these major liquidity providers across the world. We source liquidity, whoever gives the best price. One of the regulatory constraints that we have is best execution. So we have to make sure that the price that we get is the best in the market, provided there are constraints and slippage. So we do not take that decision actively. Whoever gives us the best quote, depending upon risk limits, we source it from there. There's no risk over here. First, we confirm that the order has been executed by the liquidity provider, and then we give it back.
Very interesting. So this sounds very close to an exchange. Only you're serving it in a B2B fashion. When you say you source liquidity from Wintermute or any of these market makers, does that mean you get can users only place market orders? Is I guess my question, or is this like a pure trading platform?
So right now we support market orders. We are now opening up limit orders as well. That is also based on a similar model wherein you place it on an order book. From the order book, the liquidity is sourced from multiple different liquidity venues, and then the order gets executed, or it might get executed between the orders on our platform itself. But right now it's only market orders. So limit orders is experimental. We're trying to figure out how to best support it. The other order we support is an OTC order. It's called a RFQ order, wherein you can place an order and ask for, let's say, a big chunk. This is what mostly HNIs and private wealth offices end up using.
I guess the other thing here is deposit and withdrawal stack, right? Whenever your users can probably withdraw to the blockchain and deposit from the blockchain. Is that true?
Not for the banking integration right now. That's usually closed loop. It will eventually become open loop, provided the banks want to do it. We allow it, but the banks have a risk tolerance, and slowly and steadily they'll start opening it up.
It's very close to what happens in India, which is you can convert fiat to crypto.
Yes. But we also have an OTC desk wherein you can withdraw crypto freely.
We'd love to know the engineering principles. How do you hire? What kind of people you look for? The tech stack, things like these.
So the tech stack is, for better or worse, the tech stack right now is TypeScript. It scales really well. Like I think people think that you can't have really fast services. Our P99 latency is like 30 milliseconds, which you can get on TypeScript if you architect it really well. Now we are adding, because it's a PubSub based architecture, we want to have some of the consumers written in Golang or Rust or whatever is required. Golang is the first one we want to do because it seems to be cool. Like I don't really care about the language. I have written in Python, C++, JavaScript, whatever solves the purpose at the end of the day is the language that you have to use. I think we have a very simple hiring process. We actually hired someone in 48 hours last week after I had a very bad incident when someone didn't join. I was going to say that one guy called Aditya said that he's not going to join. We got another Aditya in like 48 hours, and I think we got the better Aditya in like the last 48 hours. So we have 5 rounds. The first round is a small chat with me. That small chat is just 15 minutes, and I just want to test if that person is a good fit for the company or not. In that, I'm looking for like team, like culture fit. Is like a vibe check, more or less. I want to see if people have the hustle, they want to work hard. I don't really care where you're from. As long as you have a innate thirst to actually learn and you have that hunger to learn, that's all that I really care about, right? You want to know that if this person joins the team, everyone will be better off or not. We don't like to hire, like I think brilliant jokes. We like to hire people who are consistent and hardworking. I don't want people who will be assholes to anyone else in the team. We don't have anyone like that. I think the two principles that I hire for is you need to be like very independent. It's a very flat hierarchy. There is no micromanagement. You should not block people. So you should be someone who actually goes out and helps people rather than blocking them. We try to have a very collaborative approach to programming over here because we are a remote first team. We don't have in office, so we want people who actually help each other out. After that, we have 2 or 3 interviews with the different engineering teams. We focus more on real world development skills. So, what kind of production quality code you've written? What is your previous experiences? How to do system design? DSA is not usually covered. We will ask them to write some piece of code which is production ready, some data structure or algorithm, which is more what you will write in a real world environment rather than an abstract environment of like dynamic programming. So it's more realistic that way. If someone actually we think is good but fails an interview, we ask them to do it again in a few weeks. If we think that someone is like, we try to give multiple opportunities to people who might just come under stress because people try to think interview as a stressful environment. It is okay for us for people to retry. We do not say that, hey, once you fail, you cannot retry for views. So that's a different approach that we have. Then one of my co-founders talks to the engineer if they're like senior level, and if everything goes well, we just or hire them. Doesn't take more than 2 to 3 weeks to actually close the process. We've done it much quicker, like we did for 48 hours last week.
That's amazing. Are you still hiring? I think a few folks would be a good fit.
How big is the team right now? I also see you guys are post Series B now, right?
So we are post Series A. I don't know what it means. We've raised enough. I don't know. The capital number is very weird. But the total team is 75 people. The engineering team now is 16 people going to 20, which is far bigger than I anticipated it to be. Like I prefer small teams, but we have so many things to solve that we went ahead. We're still hiring for people. And I think I like to talk to people, and if they are good, we don't hire from a scarcity mindset. So we don't really hire people that, hey, like everything is going bad, we need to hire people. We try to talk to people and figure out that if they're good, we find a position in the team. I think that works better. Whenever I've hired from a mindset that, hey, we need to hire someone right now, it's always been a bad hire. So we are open to hiring people. If someone is smart, who can pick up things, work independently, we are more than happy to figure out how they can work with Fuse.
Do you guys support perps yet, or margin trading, or is that on the charts?
So those are things that we want to do, but that requires a different license. So the interesting thing about the domain we are in is if you want to do anything derivatives, you need a different license, and the capital requirement for license is very different. So in this particular case, in margins, etc., you need a different kind of like capital requirement to actually do it. The biggest challenge that we have is our balance sheet. Like how much can you actually do with a limited amount of balance sheet? This is solved if you become a big player like Galaxy Digital, who's one of our investors as well, or let's say a Binance, which has like billions of dollars in balance sheet. We are adding more order types. We are adding more banking partners. We are adding more custodians. So we are doing all of this with a small team right now, but there's a lot of things that we want to build out.
It seems like you're operating in a very tightly regulated space. Not just your engineering, your entire architecture, all the systems that you build need to adhere to a certain compliance standard. Not only that, but any new product decisions or even a future that you need to consider has to go via the regulator, right? So that means a completely different process. So I am curious how you think through technical decisions and also how you think about product decisions, given that you are operating in a very highly constrained environment regulator-wise?
A lot of the principles have been set into the architecture, right? Because it's an event-based mechanism, every event is audited automatically. We do not allow rollbacks. So, in the sense that once you do an order, it is unlikely that the order can be cancelled. You'll have to trade away. Like we build the system such that it's fat finger proof that if you do a mistake, it should not like you need multiple checks to make sure that everything is right. Um, and I'm not like we spoke about deposit and withdrawals. It's not just a deposit and withdrawal has multiple layers to it. So when you withdraw a fund, when you are in a regulated environment, you have to check that the final wallet destination has to be screened. So we screen whether this is an address which has been used for any illicit activities. Has it used by any hacker collective? If it has, we do not process the withdrawal. So that is called KYT, know your transaction. So we do address screening and KYT using elliptic chain analysis. These are the multiple tools you can. After that, people don't know that every time you do a transfer, you have to do something called a travel rule, wherein you actually encrypt the information about who the sender and receiver is, and you match that information. So let's say if you deposit into the Fuse platform, we get a deposit. You say that it has come from Harkirat, but it's actually come from Srijan. So we will match that information from the sender and make sure that it is actually correct information. So all of these things have to be built into the system. Fortunately, we are very API and automation driven. So we try to automate as much as possible. We've automated all of these checks. So we don't want to have like manual, like we're a small team handling a lot of these things because we've automated as many things as possible. Then there are other things like in terms of just the architecture, we have multiple sidecars. We partnered with players like Exopos. We have a SIM. We self-host a lot of things. So we self-host Grafana, we self-host telemetry, we self-host AppSmith, Metabase. All of these tools are self-hosted. We use our own VPN solution. We use Tailscale to self-host all of this. So we don't shy away from doing a lot of the heavy lifting in DevSecOps to make sure that our end-to-end pipeline is really secure. Like one of the things that I love doing, I still spend 30 to 40% of my time coding. I do most of the releases with everyone, look at whatever the code changes are. Because I think the joy of automating writing code is still there. People will say that AI will come in, write a lot of code, but that just makes it much more fun, right? You don't write the smaller bits of code, you think about the larger architecture pieces on how to orchestrate everything together. Um, Being in a regulated environment is not like, yes, you have the reporting requirements, but if you use the right architecture, if you have all of these tools in place and you build with the building blocks in place to actually adhere to compliance, it becomes much more simpler.
What does your typical release cycle look like?
We release 3 or 5 times a day. Like it's all CI/CD, and I think that is one of the interesting things that we built. We use ECS right now. The problem with ECS is coordinating between different services and ECS is hard. It does not come out of the box. They don't support blue-green deployment out of the box. So we've built an architecture on top which does that. Like because it's a event-based, like it's an event-based pub-sub mechanism. What we do is we have a coordinator. As soon as the coordinator is getting restarted, it blocks all the other consumers. Um, and all the other consumers will only consume the existing message and then go on a stop. They will only start consuming message when they restart in the next version. So we've built a blue-green and a rolling deployment mechanism on top of ECS to do multiple deployments in a day without losing messages. And we wanted to do multiple deployments in a day because there's this book called the Phoenix Project, which I'm inspired a lot by. Over there, the idea is as soon as you stop deploying daily, automatically deployments become hard because you have to coordinate everything for one entire week or entire month. Instead, if you deploy daily and multiple times, the release failures go down. Uh, so we try to deploy as many times as possible. This was one of the biggest changes that had to be done to my engineering team. Earlier, they were hesitant, and now all of them are like, yeah, let's just deploy. So that change of attitude that you can deploy every day, that gives you a lot of freedom. That also gives you the freedom that if something breaks, you can roll back. Usually things don't break because we have multiple E2E integration tests, which run on the 4 different environments we have. We have a development, staging, pre-prod, and prod environment. So every environment has E2E tests which run throughout the day. As soon as something fails, you know that something has failed. But you have also the ability to immediately deploy anything very quickly. Uh, Again, our automation helps. We have GitHub Actions. We use really fast GitHub Action runners. We have coverage, which is 90, more than 99% for most of those things. Most companies will not focus on unit test coverage. I focus a lot because it's the broken window theory, right? Once you have 60% coverage, no one wants 90%. But once you have 99%, going down is always going to be painful. So that works really well. It is a little pedantic. A lot of people hate me for just pushing the coverage up, but in the long term, it works really well.
Especially in a startup, you want to kind of move fast and break things.
Yes.
It's one of those things that you just can't afford to do because of the nature of the industry, right? So
Yes. But you can break in dev, staging, and pre-prod, right? If you catch it early, you can just break as much things as possible in development. Like if you have pipelines, so in our case, a developer makes a change, pushes it into development. If everything is good, it goes to staging. You have three layers which will actually automatically catch any error. So even before production, there are multiple points in which you know if this is breaking, you will not release it. Then finally, when a release happens to production, you manually review the code again. So this is the third time you're reviewing. You actually do a risk impact assessment whether there is any critical component which is getting affected or not. Obviously, you have different SLAs. Let's say in our particular case, we have internal tools. If you deploy something and an internal tool breaks, that's okay, right? You can fix it later, or you can have something that patches it. But if a core use case for a bank breaks, that's not okay. So we try to also evaluate what is the risk of a release. We are always backwards compatible. Like we try to make sure that we never do a breaking change. Like that is one of the things that we keep on talking about, how to make sure that you will not break. And that requires 2, 3 releases, right? First release is backwards compatible, making sure everything gets migrated, and then deploying the next release wherein everything is clean. It's a process, it's an acumen that most engineers develop. But once you develop it, it's just good engineering. People think that writing code is just writing code, but there's a lot that goes into writing code at production scale, which is going to handle hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars. Uh, it's an interesting technical problem. I think the one thing that I'm really proud of is the way we do releases right now. It's a really good mechanism. And it took us a while to come to the position that we are right now. But earlier we were a little afraid because there were these corner cases. Now most of the corner cases are handled.
it's interesting. You also mentioned you guys are it's a monolith, right? Sorry, not a
Yes.
monolith, but a monorepo. So
Yeah.
so how do you maintain it must take like a tremendous amount of discipline to make sure must take a tremendous amount of discipline to make sure nothing goes wrong, especially with the monorepo, right?
Releases don't break in a monorepo because when you have type checking, so you know that one layer is already done. You have services which, if you change one part of the code, you immediately know the contract is broken on another part. If you have microservices, and because you have a consumer architecture, and whenever you do this event-based mechanism, you don't send messages on the queue, you send IDs on the queue. So everything is Postgres is still our ultimate source of truth. You have a message that this has processed, you check the ID, you go to the DB, and now you know what the newest state is, then you process it. I think once you have microservices, you might end up deploying a microservice which change the API contract, and other microservice might not have an updated contract and things might break. If you have a mono repo with a consumer pub sub mechanism, and you know that there's only one source of information and everything else is a sync, you can coordinate much better. It's a much better programming model in my mind because if one of the contracts changes in one part of the code, the other part will start doing a type check error. We also make sure that there are no NEs, there are no unknowns. It is like strictly typed. So you know that something breaks, you immediately get to fix it. Second thing that happens in this particular contract is because only IDs are going, you know what the state machine is. And because we are backwards compatible, uh, I think the other thing that comes into play is if you deploy too many times rather than deploying once a week, automatically your change quantum is very small. So whenever something goes in, even though we have hundreds of thousands of lines of code, at max you're touching 5 or 6 files. So if 5 or 6 files are being affected, you know what can go wrong. Like you can really plan what is going wrong. If 100 files are being affected, no one knows what's going to go wrong with the system. So it's much more predictable if the quantum of changes is smaller. So I'm a big believer of even deploying a single file. Like if there's a small file change, you can just deploy hundreds of times a day. We don't do that 100 times because like ECS is slow, so it takes like 20 minutes to do a deployment, which is the only constraint factor that we have right now. we have as parallel as possible, but still it takes some time.
Now I understand like the TypeScript and the mono repo explains why your build you had tweeted about your build time being like taking 20 minutes
Yes.
on GitHub Actions. Now
Yes.
I
It's
understand
gone
why
down.
that's the case.
Yeah. No, so the thing is, we use Jest. So we use Jest on Rust. So we do SWC. The problem is we have 5,000 test cases across like hundreds of files. And over 3 years, it started taking a lot of time. But now I've just put M4 Max. So I'm like, just put hardware to the problem. Why should I care about it? That's the Solana philosophy, right? Better hardware is just the solution to a lot of scaling problems. It's now down to 2 minutes again, which is okay.
Thank you so much for joining us, Srijan. It was fantastic having you.
Thanks a lot, Shek.